Hello YouTube. Today I would like to talk about a starter that came off of a 1947 John Deere Model B. Now, a few weeks ago we actually went to go take the tractor over to a friend's house to do a photo shoot with it, and when we had it on the trailer we got back there and went to go start it, and it was just completely dead. The tractor didn't even turn over or nothing. We checked the battery was fine in it, so unfortunately it actually was a problem with the starter itself. But before we actually start talking about the problem, we're going to explain a little bit more about where the starter was located and about how to take it off and how exactly it works. So when you walk up to the tractor, what you're actually going to see is this cover right here over top of the flywheel itself. And this hole right here is going to be sticking up right over here where my finger is. And all you will actually see is this button right here with a spring underneath of it, just like this. And what you do is you actually press down on the button, it compresses this spring, goes in behind the flywheel back here. Then what it does is it comes around the starter, pushes down on this, then the switch makes a connection, and then the starter begins to turn over, and then so does the tractor as well. So one thing that we actually noticed about the tractor is when we took it off, we noticed that the switch that was on it, the copper terminal right here, was actually really loose on the inside. So we tried to fix it there, try to see if we can get a little bit more travel out of it to make a better connection between the button right here and then the terminal onto the starter itself. And unfortunately, we actually found out that this was the incorrect switch for this model starter. This switch right here goes on your earlier tractors from your 30s. And the main difference is that what actually works right here with this lever that connects the button actually is a different one that sits on the button itself. So this didn't work, and we ordered the correct one that sits on there. So this is the correct starter button that actually sits onto the tractor itself, and as you will notice, it's a lot more simpler than this one right here. And what happens is as it sits on there, it gets screwed on, and then when that rod comes down and pushes, the button itself gets pressed down, and then that's when the connection is made and the starter turns over. Something else we noticed when we took it apart is that the rod that was on it was actually bent, as you can see down here at the bottom, and it was bent when it was connecting right here to this cast piece that presses down onto the starter. So what we actually wanted to do was make a better piece, and this was the first result. So this is made out of cold forged steel. We just went to the local hardware store and bought a 3/8 rod. We ran a die over it and ran the threads into it, and we made it a little bit longer to where it was supposed to be at factory specs, because the top of this right here was actually broken off, as you can see. So we made it the correct length to fit on the button. And then we also noticed that maybe the spring was a little bit wore out, and we wanted to get another one. Well, the funny thing is that this spring is actually the original spring on the tractor, but it's way too short. There's only 6 loops inside of this spring, where there's actually supposed to be 10. Now, this spring is actually stronger, and what it does is it helps hold the button up, and it keeps the appendix of the starter away from the flywheel. Now, this is important because actually, as you notice right here on the flywheel itself, at certain places the teeth is actually ground down, and it's a little bit wore off. So what was happening is that the spring wasn't strong enough to hold the button all the way up, and therefore it was grinding a little bit because the appendix right here was slipping out. So we actually fixed this, and then when we made the steel one, we were thinking, why can't we shave a little bit of weight and make an aluminum one? So we actually went and got a 3/8 aluminum rod, and we made the piece right here. So this piece should work, and the only reason we're using an aluminum rod is because it's pushing directly down on the starter. So when this piece is connected right here and it pushes down, there shouldn't be no twisting motion at all, because if this starter bent in any way from sideways like this on the rod, we wouldn't use aluminum, because aluminum isn't strong enough to bend like that over a long period. But pushing straight down, the rod should be plenty strong enough, and plus it makes the tractor, even if it is a few ounces lighter, it will add up over time. Now, of course, this may not work, where if it doesn't, we actually have the backup one that we made right here out of steel. So this right here is the starter itself. This is the original starter that's on the tractor. It is not a John Deere starter. It is a Delco starter, and most of these antique tractors are actually like that. So this starter right here is a model number 1107942. Now, when you're reading the tag on this starter, and that's all the parts that you need to get that fit on the starter itself, is the first digits. Well, you may also notice that there is a gap right here, and then there's 4 more numbers, and this one happens to be 7C31. These last 4 numbers will actually tell you when the starter was made. So it was made in 1947, which is indicated by the 7. If it was made in 1948, it would be an 8, and the 9 would be a 9, and so on and so on. The C indicates the month of the year, so C would actually be March, and then these 2 numbers right here would be the day. So this starter right here was made March 31st, 1947. So the starter is made before the tractor itself, so then we actually know that the tractor was made later on in the year and not in the spring, or very close after. What was actually wrong was the starter itself. So inside of here, we have the brushes down here on this end. There's 4 of them, and then what they do is you have your core in here, and the brushes come out, and then the power is given, and your appendix starts to spin down here, which then engages inside of your flywheel. And the main problem was right here, this button, the solder had broken loose on it from all the connections down in here, and you can actually take this terminal and you could twist it around. Now you can't do that because it has actually been soldered and fixed. So what we're going to do now is we have all the correct parts here, including the button itself. So we're going to put it all back together along with the cover on. And what we're going to do afterwards is I'm going to have a follow-up video of us adjusting the rod and everything, and then fine-tuning the starter in to where it'll work better. But as you look underneath, this here is actually where the starter sits. So right there's the hole, and this little notch underneath of it is the switch right here on top, or this little lever that moves back and forth. And then the starter itself sits back here underneath of the tractor inside this chamber, and then there's just a green steel plate that sits over top of this. So it's actually a very simple design, and it's not a whole lot of work to replace it. I do recommend having at least 2 people taking this off and trying to fix it, because there's got to be a person laying underneath of here, and make sure that you catch this and you have both hands on it when you go to unbolt it, because it's hanging straight down underneath the tractor and it will come down and hit you. So make sure you take all safety precautions when you're taking this apart, and I would just recommend having 2 people, like I said earlier, to help you do it. Thank you guys very much for viewing the video. That is all we're going to talk about so far. So like I said, I'll have a follow-up one of us putting the starter on and fine-tuning it in, and then we'll get to see it working and get to see it in running order. Please leave a like and subscribe, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask so in the comments section. Thank you.